This section, we will assign our various samples to different key groups to make a program. So, press the Edit Program button, and our first page will read. All right, as you probably noticed, this page is very similar to page 1 in the Edit Sample mode, and it operates in a similar manner. We can select, copy, rename, or delete any program. But first, we have to come up with a name for our program, and then dial it in. Push the letter and dial in our program name. Let's call it numbers, like I already have. Hit Enter, or go to the next page. Page 2 has two functions. Key loudness ranges from -50 to +50. What it does is increase the volume the higher you play on the keyboard. If you set it in the positive field, and decrease the volume the higher you play it in the negative mode. The positional crossfade on-off switch lets you create hard and soft samples out of your existing normal sample types. This will only work if you set the velocity switch threshold lower than 128 on page 4 of Edit Program, but we'll cover that later. Let's move on to page 3. Page 3 is where we add or delete the number of key groups we want to use. Since we have 3 samples, let's use 3 key groups. Press the arrow cursor button twice to move the magic arrow to the copy field. To copy, we press the plus or on button. To delete key groups, we press the minus or off button. Since the S-900 automatically defaults to 1 key group, press the plus button once to get 2 key groups, and one more time to get 3 key groups. Now that we have 3 key groups, let's move to page 4. The velocity crossfade on-off function lets you use a previously recorded sample crossfade as a crossfade in the on position or just as a soft sample. Let's turn it on for now. The velocity switch threshold lets you create hard and soft samples out of existing samples. If you set it lower than 128 and also turn the positional crossfade on for your key groups in page 2, you'll get hard and soft samples. We'll come back to this section later. So move to page 5. Okay, page 5 is a section where we assign our samples to the respective key groups and set the ranges of those key groups. This is the only tricky part of the S-900. I find it's actually very logical, and once you've done it a couple of times, it gets really easy. Press the cursor button once to move it into the key group field. Key group 3 should now be flashing. Using the control knob, dial up key group 1. Now press the arrow cursor again and move it to the soft sample field. Now use the control knob to dial up voice C1. Now, instead of going on to the low key, high key field, I like to assign the rest of my key groups to their samples. So move the cursor back to key group and dial in key group 2. Move the cursor back to the soft sample field and dial in voice C2. Repeat these functions one more time and assign key group 3 to our soft and loud sample. Now we've assigned our 3 key groups to our 3 key samples. And as you dial through the key groups, you will see key group 1, voice C1, key group 2, voice C2, and key group 3, our soft, loud sample. Okay, now we have to set the low key, high key range. Before we go any further, let's take a look at this keyboard diagram. What this diagram shows us is various reference points in a keyboard scaling, such as middle C or C3, A440 or A3, the minimum 73 key sound of the S-900, which is C0, the maximum range of the S-900, which is C6, and all their corresponding MIDI note numbers. C3 is MIDI note 60, A3 is MIDI note 69, and C6 is MIDI note 96. In other words, every note on the keyboard is given a pitch number and a corresponding MIDI note number. This is a very useful thing to know by heart, but for now, use this diagram. Remember, we gave each sample a pitch number when we recorded it, so that we could tell at which pitch they were recorded. Now this is where that becomes very handy. We have a sample at pitch C1, another sample at pitch C2, another sample at pitch C3. And each of these are assigned to key groups 1 through 3 respectively. So starting at the assigned pitch numbers, let's set the range for each key group to be 11 notes, or almost a full octave. So the range of key group 1 would go from C1 or MIDI note number 36 to B1 or MIDI note 47. Key group 2 would be C2 or MIDI note 48 to B2 MIDI note 59. Key group 3 would be C3 or MIDI note 60 to C4 or MIDI note 72. This will give us a 3-octave range for our program. Now that we have figured that out, all we have to do is load it into the machine and we're home free. Okay, let's go back and dial up key group 1. Move the cursor to the low key field and dial in C1. Move to the high key field and dial in B1 47. All right, move to key group 2. The low key will dial in C2. And the high key will be B2, or MIDI note 59. Move to key group 3. Our low key will be C3, or 60, and C4 will be our high key. Now we have just built our key groups, and now have a basic program called numbers. So press the play button and we'll see the number 2 program is numbers, and it's flashing. Now let's play C1, C2, and C3, and we'll hear the 3 different samples. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and of course, soft. Okay. Finally, let's play a 3-octave scale, not exactly Beethoven.
1,
4,
soft.
but a program just the same. There are still 11 pages left in edit program mode, but let's move on and come back to those later.